It's a religious split that's almost 1,400 years old, but it's still fueling conflicts that are all over our headlines today. Look, if you really want to get what's happening in the Middle East, you've got to understand the divide between Sunni and Shia Islam. So let's dive right in.
But here's the thing. Before we jump in our time machine and go way back, we actually have to start with today. Because to really feel the weight of this history, you need to see the massive impact it's having on the world right now. Today, this whole divide basically looks like a massive geopolitical rivalry between two regional heavyweights. On one side, you have Saudi Arabia, the big Sunni power, backing Sunni governments. And on the other, you have the Shia Islamic Republic of Iran, supporting Shia groups all over the place, like Hezbollah or the Houthis. It's kind of like a Cold War, but one that's being fought in these incredibly brutal, very hot proxy wars.
And that brings us to the big question, right? The question at the heart of all this. How on earth did a disagreement about who should lead, way back in the 7th century, spiral into this, into these huge modern conflicts? Well, to answer that, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning.
Okay, so let's rewind the clock. We're going to the Arabian Peninsula, year 632. The Islamic community is brand new, it's still young, and it's about to face its very first, and you could argue its most important crisis ever: the death of its founder, the Prophet Muhammad.
I mean, the Prophet's life was totally revolutionary. He went from his first revelation in 610 to uniting a whole community in Medina. He literally built a new faith. But then, in 632, he passed away. And here is the absolute crucial point, the one that changes everything. He didn't name a successor.
So in that moment of confusion, two main ideas pop up. One group, the people who would eventually become the Sunnis, believed the community's leaders should get together and pick the most qualified person. They supported Abu Bakr, a close friend of the Prophet. But another group completely disagreed. They argued that leadership was a divine right that had to stay within the Prophet's family. For them, the only choice was his cousin and son-in-law, Ali.
This group, the one that backed Ali, became known as the Shiite Ali. It literally just means the party of Ali. And right there, that's where we get the word Shia. At its core, it was a political position born out of this crisis of succession.
Well, the Sunnis were the majority, and their view won out. Abu Bakr became the first leader, or caliph. But the disagreement, it didn't just go away. In fact, about 50 years later, an event happened that would cement this divide forever. Not just politically, but in a deep, emotional, and spiritual way.
The year is 680. We're at a place called Karbala, in what's now Iraq. Ali's son, Hussein, looks at the ruling caliphate and sees it as corrupt and unjust. He refuses to pledge his allegiance. He decides to make a stand.
The odds were just impossible, staggering. Hussein rode out to face this powerful empire with just 72 followers and family members. And they were met by a state army that had thousands of soldiers. It wasn't a battle. It was a mismatch.
Hussein and his followers were killed. But here's the thing. This massacre didn't crush the Shia movement. It gave it a soul. Hussein's martyrdom became the central story for Shia Islam, this powerful narrative of sacrifice, of standing up to injustice, of resisting tyranny. It defines their identity to this very day.
So over the next few centuries, this religious split gets locked into place by huge, powerful empires. And that really starts to shape the demographic map that we still see today.
And it's really crucial to understand the numbers here. Sunnis make up the vast majority of Muslims around the world, something like 90%. Shia Muslims make up about 10%, and they're mostly concentrated in just a few key countries.
So how did the map get drawn this way? Well, a lot of it came down to a rivalry between two giant empires. For hundreds of years, the Sunni world was basically led by the Ottoman Empire, and their great rival, the Safavid Empire in Persia. In the 16th century, the Safavids did something huge. They converted Iran to Shia Islam and made it the state religion. Their competition basically hardened the sectarian borders right across the Middle East.
Now, for a lot of recent history, these differences, while important, didn't always lead to war. Many Sunnis and Shias lived together peacefully. But one event in the 20th century changed absolutely everything, and it weaponized this divide for a whole new era.
And it's so important to remember this. For a lot of people in the mid-20th century, whether you were Sunni or Shia, was kind of like being Protestant or Catholic in many countries today. It was part of your identity, sure, but it didn't run your daily life for your politics. They intermarried, they were neighbors, until 1979. The Islamic Revolution in Iran was a political earthquake. It created the world's first modern Shia theocracy. And this new government was assertive, it was revolutionary, and it wanted to export its ideology. This was a direct challenge to the conservative Sunni monarchies, especially Saudi Arabia. And just like that, the ancient rivalry was reignited with explosive new force.
So, this brings us full circle. That historical schism, reignited by revolution, is now playing out as a modern struggle for who gets to dominate the region. And here's where you see the consequences. The Syrian civil war, the brutal conflict in Yemen, the political chaos in Iraq and Lebanon, in all these places, Iran and Saudi Arabia have backed opposing sides, often along sectarian lines, just pouring fuel on the fire of local conflicts.
So here's the crucial takeaway. While the split began with a theological dispute, today it's just as much, if not more, about politics, about power, about oil, and about regional influence. The religious difference has become a powerful tool for leaders to rally support and fight their geopolitical battles.
Which leaves us with one final, critical question. This 1,400-year-old story of faith and community has been twisted into a modern-day struggle for control, and it really makes you wonder, when ancient faith is used as a tool for modern power, who really benefits?